Hello and welcome to this edition of Journey to a Dream, brought to you by Kawasaki Insurance. I'm Beth Espy, and this time I've been talking to a very entertaining trio. Now, they'll certainly be no strangers to people who are fans of road racing. In fact, the father will be very, very well known, and we learn quite a lot about how he got into racing during this podcast. But also, fantastically, his two sons are literally following in his footsteps. They're competing in the Southern 100 for the first time this year. Let's meet them now.
Dicky Gale, oily rag at bus vanning and general pain in the butt to the management.
I'm Jim Gale. I'm the driver of Team BSR, and I also work for bus vanning, but I work in the office side, so I'm less oily.
I'm Ben Gale, the passenger jumpy monkey round boy on the back of the bike, and I work for test and maintenance as a fire and security engineer.
We'll start with you, Dicky, because what we're talking about is sidecars, essentially. Take me back to when your dream of being a sidecar passenger all started.
The dream started probably when I was about 10 or 11, watching the bikes, the TT at the end of Cronkerford Straight. But before then, used to go and watch all the early morning practices for the Southern 100. I just used to walk down the road from my parents' house, 4 o'clock in the morning, get a good seat at Bellabeg Hairpin and watch the bikes from there. And
was this something that was in the family already, or were you one of the first?
My Uncle David used to race solos, semi-pro. They had a deal between them and Mike Halewood's dad, Stan. When Halewood was finished with his bikes for the year, Stan would sell them to my Uncle David, or to his father. And so he did solos. He did the TT, 125s, 250s, mostly the Clips course. But he did 2 years doing the full mountain course, and he'd never finished a TT, whether it was on the Clips or on the mountain course. And his last TT actually fell off at the waterworks when he was, I think he said he was about 7th in the race at the time. The Uncle David was a good rider, but he couldn't stop meddling. They'd have the bike running perfectly, and then just before they went to the start line, he'd mess with something, and then the bike would break down. That's where it came from.
So what was it about being a passenger, particularly? Why was it that you thought that's what you wanted to do?
Couldn't reach the handlebars.
That could have been a problem, yeah. Basically, the thing about it was me and one of my mates, Paul Farger, we were going to buy a sidecar between us, and I was going to be the driver and Paul was going to be the passenger. It was all set up, we're going to do it, and then something happened and we didn't have enough money to actually buy the bike. And then one night I was out with my cousin Bobby, underage drinking and riding a motorbike at the same time, with Bobby on the back of the bike and hadn't passed me test. Took Bobby home and his dad went, "You're not going anywhere until I've got some coffee down your throat." And we just sat talking in the kitchen, and he said, "You've ever thought of racing these bikes?" And I said, "Yeah, I've always wanted to have a go." And he said, "Well, I'll finish paying my mortgage off." So he said, "I fancy having a go at sidecar racing. Would you get in the sidecar?" And with the alcohol in me, he said, "Go on, I'll do it." Went home, promptly forgot everything about it, and 3 weeks later, Wally, again, I was down at Bobby's house, and Wally comes up and says, "I bought the sidecar." "What sidecar?" "You said you were going to be the passenger." "Did I?" "Well, I suppose I better have a go then." And that was how it started.
What happened next? What do you remember about the process to getting to a start line?
Basically, he went with Wally down to where he worked at the Marine Biological Station. He was the skipper on one of their boats, the Kumar. He had the bike hidden in his lockup down at the Marine Biological Station. Went down, had a look at it. It was a 550 Honda 4, the 16-inch front wheel, a 10-inch back wheel, and it looked like a wheelbarrow wheel on the side. But it was good enough. We got it fired up. Took a couple of illegal laps of the island down at the Marine Biological Station. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Go on then, we'll have a go." So then it was literally a case of getting leathers, crash helmets, applying for the licence, and off to the first meeting at Derby, which was a test day. We borrowed a Ford Transit van to go up with, and as we were driving up, the key lever came off in his hand, and we were messing around trying to get that in. The passenger door fell off the van, so we decided to leave the van there, and one of my parents' neighbours came along with his van and towed us up to Derby, and towed us back again afterwards. That was it. We just got to Derby, went out on the track, had a go, promptly broke down. David and Barry Costain pulled in to see if they could help, and while Barry was messing with the bike, David waved to me, shouted, "Get on." So I climbed on his bike and he set off, and we did 4 laps before we were flagged off the circuit and given my first telling off by a clerk of the course for switching bikes during a test session, which was not allowed to be done unless you were doing it in pit lane.
Your first telling off. I'm just going to guess here, Dicky, but I wonder if there have been a few more over the years.
There's been a few, yeah. Gary Thompson gave me my last telling off. I used to do the pre-TT with an old family friend, Albert Brassick Price, and the practice was on the Friday night, and I was supposed to go to the riders' briefing on the Friday night at the grandstand. And because we were working on the bike together, I completely forgot about the riders' briefing. So when I turned up there on the Saturday night to go out to practice on the F2, there was a message left in scrutineer and go and see the clerk of the course. So trundled up the staircase because they turned the lift off, so as a punishment you weren't allowed to go up in the lift, so you had to walk up the staircase. And Gary comes over and he says, "What happened?" And I explained to him. He said, "Right, I'll do your rider's briefing here." And he said, "I want you lot in here to be witnesses." So everybody in the room turned and looked at me, red-faced, out of breath, and Gary just looked at me and went, "Don't do anything, bleep, stupid. That's your rider's briefing. You've been round here often enough. Now get downstairs and get out of my sight."
You're painting a wonderful picture there. I just want to go back to something you said. Obviously, you had quite an eventful drive up to Derby for that first time, and you mentioned a friend of your parents. What did your parents make of all this?
I was 18. Well, I was 17 when I started it, but they couldn't do nothing about it. They knew that I wanted to do it, so that was it. My father had wanted to race, but my mother did the crafty trick of getting pregnant to stop him, so she made him gave him the choice, you can race or you can stay with the baby and me. And so he chose me and my mother. That was it. And really, they never tried to put a block in the way to stop me riding. Look, quite often my dad would slip us a few quid towards the petrol and things like that with the bike and things like that, just to keep us going. It was my transport, because I didn't have a car licence at the time, so they had to take me up to Derby in the car if I wasn't going up in when we got a decent van or a vehicle, or if I wasn't travelling up with the bike with Wally.
Really, it takes so much support. It's not just about the person who's on the start line, is it? It's about just gathering favours, I guess, from wherever you can do.
Yeah, I mean, my first set of leathers, Barry Costain sourced them first. They belonged to a local solo champion called Kenny Harrison. He was luckily enough was the same size as me at the time, and he was getting new leathers, so he sold me his old leathers for a tenner. Stuff like that. He'd borrow and beg and make do and all that kind of stuff until you could afford to get stuff of your own. And everybody in the paddock was always helping everybody else out. If you broke down, there was always at least another 3 people from other teams that would come over and help you. I wasn't riding at the time, but I witnessed it when George Oates, the late George Oates, was Derby Road Circuit, and Barry and Dave, again, had broken down, trying to fix the bike. And George comes over, he says, "What you done this time?" And Dave said, "Oh, God, it won't go." "All right, come on, let's have a go." And he grabs the spanners, and first thing he did was he picked a piece up that was sitting on the deck of the sidecar, and he said, "Well, you don't need that thing," and threw it off into the grass. And I carried on for about 10 minutes, and they went, "Oh, David." "Yeah, you know that thing I threw away?" "Yeah, I need it now." "What?" So David and Barry scampered off over it and then around in the grass, coming back proudly. "I've got one, I found it. And George says, "Oh, I've managed to fix it without it. Go on, you can get out on the circuit now." And that was it. They were racing. Wouldn't tell them what he'd done, but he got them on the track.
To what extent would you say that racing and wanting to racing and spending the year just thinking about where you were going to race and how much did that take over, would you say?
It didn't take over me life in that way, because I still had all sorts of other interests and things like that. Playing football for Colby and St John's, basic hobbies, going fishing and all that kind of stuff. But whenever you got spare time, you were down in the garage messing around with the bike, doing something. Yeah, so in a way it does take over your life, but for me, it didn't really take over my life until I started doing the Southern 100 and the TT. Once I started doing that, then the bug really bit.
And having had that dream, watching the Southern 100 in particular, what was it like being part of it, something that you'd watched as a youngster on that corner?
Well, I did my first actual proper race in 1981. I think it was the same year that Dave Molly started, or did he start in 1980, a year before me? So I did my first full season in 81. And then come 82, I wanted to stretch my legs a bit. I wanted to do the Southern 100, so I doctored me race licence, because you had to do 10 races to qualify for get rid of your clubman's licence.
You're not going to get into any trouble for revealing all of this, are you? No, it's
well, it's a bit late now, isn't it? 39 years later, I don't think the ACU can catch me. So you had 10 races that you had to do, and there were supposed to be 10 individual races, and I'd done the season at Derby, and I think we'd done 6 meetings. The clerk of the course had signed them after every race meeting, and I just altered my licence and put ×3 against each signature. Sent it off thinking, they're never going to believe this. And they fell for it, and it came back with me national licence, and not only a national licence, but a national driver's licence. So I was allowed to drive solos as well as sidecars and passenger. Nowadays, you've got to stay if you're going to be a driver or a passenger, and that's on your licence. But those days you got away with it. And then got a phone call from a fellow called John Bulvant, who had a hotel in Peel. I can't remember the name of the hotel now. 1982. He was entering the Southern Under for the first time, and he asked me to have a go. Would I jump on with him? So I said, yeah, of course I would. 750 Kawasaki twin cylinder. First year of Formula 2s, or twin cylinders, in the Southern 100, and there was 3 of us entered, 3 twins, and Dave Saville's sponsor, Sabre Engineering, that was one of his company, I think. They put a trophy up just for the twin cylinders. We were the only one that finished both races. We got lapped in both races, but we finished both races, and so we won the trophy for that. I've still got it. I didn't give it back afterwards when we were supposed to. It's still sitting on the mantelpiece in the front room. That was my first major trophy. I wasn't going anywhere. I was staying in Armagh. I was staying in my house. Strange enough, that was the first year Steve Webster did the Southern 100 as well, so we got to be friends with Steve Webster and Tony Hewitt. They were stood beside us in the queue for signing on, and they were newcomers. I was a newcomer, so I ended up spending a lot of time with them, talking to them and going around the circuit with them. They ended up setting the lap record and should have won it, only on the last lap. They were trying to pass Tony Baker, and Tony Baker's breather pipe came off his fuel tank and sprayed petrol across the front of theirs and across Steve's visor, so he couldn't see properly, so he settled for second place instead. We were number 66, and we weren't the last one on the programme, and they used to have an odd numbers race and an even numbers race. The fastest 15 in each race went into the Sidecar Championship, and everybody else went into the consolation race, but it practiced everybody together, so there was 70 sidecars on the track going around the Southern 100. Early morning practice and another practice on the Tuesday night, because the Monday didn't exist in those days for the race meeting.
That's quite something to think about, that when we think about what the entry list, I guess, is like now. Its
insurance is just tighter and tighter and tighter, and closed it down. And to an extent, it's right. I mean, it was manic in those days, but that's all anybody knew. Because my first TT was in 84. We were numbers 66 in that one, and the following year we were number 98, and there was over 100 sidecars entered, and that was F2s and F1s running at the same time. The first rider on the road was probably reaching Ramsey when the last rider left the grandstand.
Now, Dicky, one of the things when I've been doing this podcast is that what you need to be able to really commit yourself to this sport is somebody in your life who really understands it. And if you, I suppose, were married to somebody who didn't really get it, that would be tricky. Tell me about meeting your other half.
Mum. Yeah. Well, she came to watch the TT with her boyfriend at the time. Came over from Switzerland to watch the TT, and we met up in the Mitre pub. But there was a big bunch of us. They all used to camp up Glenwillan on an area that they called we all christened it United Nations, because there was people from all different countries there: Swiss, English, German, Dutch, French. There was all sorts up there, but everybody knocked around together. So that's where we met up. And she came for a couple of years with her boyfriend, and then he went off to work in Japan, and she came over by herself. And nothing happened before anybody started sleeping forward. Came to the TT, left the TT, went to Japan, spent 6 months travelling around the Far East, went back to Switzerland, and they got married and had 2 boys, Mark and Tommy, my 2 eldest, my stepsons. And then the marriage fell apart, and she came over to watch the Southern 100. They came to a wedding that I was best man at, of one of our other mates, and then they turned up at the Southern 100 in 94, and we started to get friendly again. 95, the marriage split up. 96, we got married. She moved to the Isle of Man, February 96. Got married on the Saturday morning, 1st of June. Went off, did the Sidecar Race A. And then we had the wedding reception. Ronaldsway Social Club, sadly no longer. But the whole Sidecar paddock came down for the reception on a bus that I borrowed from work. Sorry, hired. Didn't borrow it, boss. And one of the other lads from the garage drove it for me and brought all the Sidecar paddock down for the party. And boy, was it a party. And then the day after, I don't know why I did it, I'd agreed to play in a charity football match at the Bowl, TT Riders against Manx Radio. Still drunk from the night before, from the wedding reception, playing football on the Bowl against Manx Radio TT presenters. It was an entertaining weekend, shall we say.
Can you remember who won?
Manx Radio. Beat us 3-2.
Just think, if you hadn't been hungover, eh? Your mum had 2 boys who are with us now. Sort of imagining these 2 little boys presumably coming around the paddock with you.
They've never known anything else. The 4 boys, Mark and Tommy as well, they came everywhere with us. Every race meeting I went to, they were there. Jim used to come down. They moved the riders signing on to the Sunday night before the first practice early morning on the Monday. We went down and Jim came with us, and he was sitting in the briefing and leaning against a wall in the corner, keeping out of the way of everybody, was Joey. That's Jim's hero. Jim sees Joey. Oh, Joey Lop, Joey Lop. Disappears off my knee, straight over to Joey, and spent the whole riders briefing sitting on Joey's knee, and got an autograph programme and all that kind of stuff. And then 2 days later, we're walking up through the paddock to go out for the sidecar practice, and Joey's walking the other way with Davey, his manager, and Davey's going on, oh yes, you've got a TV, you've got to go and talk to these people on the television. He said, we've got to get you in there. And Joey's going, yeah. And he sees Jim, and just as we're passing, Joey leans over, grabs Jim's nose and goes, I've got your nose, and runs off. Of course, Jim runs after him, followed by his 3 brothers, all chasing after Joey. And Davey's going mad because he's got this TV thing all organised, and Joey's running in between tents and vans hiding, and with the 4 boys chasing after him. That was just the way he was. He was brilliant with kids.
Jim, what do you remember about that time?
I personally don't remember much of it, unfortunately.
I think you were 3 and Ben was 1.
Yeah, so it would be pretty impressive to still remember it.
I don't stand a chance.
No, all the memories that we've got of most family holidays and stuff has been going away racing. Dad racing in Belgium. Ever since we've been around, he's always been racing, so it's always been either up at Derby, Southern London paddock, the TT paddock, like I say, places in Belgium or in England, depending on what it was. So we've just always known it, always.
Ben, do you think there was ever any question that this was going to be a path that you two would take?
Well, Jim originally wanted to be a passenger when he was growing up, so that probably would have put it a little bit in question, because I am a little too mental to be a driver.
Can't disagree with that. Can't disagree with that at all.
It's good to have that awareness, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'd be upside down more times than I'd be on 3 wheels. So, yeah, that probably would have stopped it, and then I had other hobbies outside of racing that nearly took over, but then it was when Jim bought the bike, it was meant to be one of his mates on from the pub, failed his eye test, so he couldn't jump on, and then Rhys Gibbons, now TT 3rd place, yeah, he jumped on for one little track day up at Derby with Jim.
And hated it. Absolutely hated it.
It wasn't your driving, Jim.
Every 2 laps he'd tap Jim to get him to stop. Rhys just absolutely hated it, but he then went on with his uncle at Mallory Park. Hated it. It wasn't until they had the last race of the day when it was raining and Pete said, Luke, this is embarrassing for me. We're going to finish the race and you're just going to sit there and do nothing. And as the race went on, Rhys started the passenger as the race went on. They ended up winning the race. So that was how Rhys got into it and really realised, because there again, Rhys, it's all family. Because that first race this year, of the 6 people on the rostrum, 5 of them I remember in nappies, because they were always around when I was racing with Des, the dad.
And Ben, your dad was just saying there, talking about Rhys starting to passenger. Would you be able to explain what that actually means for people who don't necessarily understand how it works?
This will be good.
Yeah, have I started yet? I mean, it's probably one of the biggest shocks to the body that you'll get. Your brain starts telling you that this is incorrect to start with, but then as you get more into it and you get more used to it, it's what people outside look at as probably one of the most mental things. I mean, I get constantly the fact of people find it crazy that we race sidecars as it is, and then they go, you the driver or the passenger? I'm like, oh, I'm the passenger. They go, oh, so you're the completely mental one. Yes, that's me. But it just doesn't feel it. The first time you get on and you look down and there's like a gap where Jim's brake is, where you can see through to the floor. First time I went on and I looked through that gap and I was like, that's pretty close, Dad, actually. That's the floor's right there. That would hurt. And now it's almost a comfort to look down and it's like, okay, yeah, we're still moving, so we're doing better. When we first went out, it was working everything I could possibly work corner-wise. It was, right, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. Come back in, be absolutely exhausted after every single time I'd done it, even though we weren't fast at all. I mean, the very first time we went round Derby, we were over 2 minutes for one lap. And I was knackered. And then that was like Dad and other passengers around being like, you don't have to always be jumping to different parts of the bike at all moments of a thing. And it was then settling down and kind of working out what you do have to do and kind of pacing yourself as well and getting fitter.
And Jim, from your point of view, at what point did this become something that you knew you were serious about and that you really wanted to do?
As Ben said, it was meant to be with a mate of mine, Woody, and we both really wanted to do it, but to become a driver, you need to have someone that already has a bike that's willing to let you have a go at it, or you've just got to go and buy one yourself.
And it's interesting, so Ben was saying you wanted to be a passenger initially.
I did, yeah.
How difficult, I suppose, was it to make that jump to think, oh, actually, that's not the route you were going to take, you were going to be the one in charge of the outfit?
I went on the back of my brother Mark's motorbike as a pillion and hated it. So I was like, if I do then get a sidecar, I want to be a driver because I do not like being not in control of the handlebars.
Have you ever had your dad as passenger?
No, unfortunately not. Dad's racing career and my racing career sadly missed each other by a couple of years, but we keep trying to tempt him to come and do like a test day or something, but he says he's too old now.
Will you not be up for that?
The only reason I stopped racing because the doctors stopped me. And stupidly enough, they found me unconscious and not breathing at work on the floor, and they rushed me off to Noble's Hospital, and they found I had a heart problem. Then my heart was only operating at 14 to 15% of what it should have done. So got flown away to Liverpool, met a doctor in Liverpool who said, I'll have you on the start line for the TT, don't worry. And I'd actually already passed my race medical for my licence for that year. They fitted me with a pacemaker and a defib. Doing what I was told, following the diet, doing the exercises, doing everything like that. Everything was working perfectly.
Medication even made his hair grow back slightly.
For us, yeah, it did. Yeah, the heart medication made my hair grow back. It's all gone again since, like, on top. But once the ACU found out I had the pacemaker, they said, that's it, no, you're not allowed to race. And when I argued about it, and they said, no, if you hit something, that could explode. I said, well, if I'm going to hit something hard enough for it to explode a pacemaker, I'm not going to be worrying about it anyway, am I? But they wouldn't accept my argument on it. Did the same with Mike Aylott. They banned him from racing as well. Conrad's old passenger. So that was it. And I thought, if I jump on with Jim for a track day or something like that, and I can still do it, I know my life's going to be absolute hell at home, and going to the race meetings as well, so I'd better just settle down and accept the fact that my time's over, and that's it. And sit back and let these ones do it instead. I mean, I've had a 42-year racing career.
And is it true that you're the competitor who's done the second highest number of TTs as a passenger?
Second in the list of the highest starts at the TT, yeah. Eddie Kiff is the only one above me. To be honest with you, I didn't look at the stats for this year, after this year. But Eddie Kiff was on 90-something starts, and I was on 47. The ambition was to get 50. That's what I wanted to do. But unfortunately, the doctors stepped in and stopped any chance of that happening. But looking back on it now with hindsight, I should have stopped a lot earlier because I wasn't enjoying it as much. I was just trying to grab this pipe dream of having the 50 starts and keeping at it. Doing the TT with Pete Fownes made me realise, come on boy, you're not up to it anymore. We'd only done 3 practice sessions. Pete was already, as a complete newcomer, was already up to 104 mile an hour, and I don't like the LCR chassis. I'm an old-fashioned guy. I like to have a corner on the platform of the bike. Pete's LCR had a hole there, and I kept putting my foot in the hole when I was trying to get over the back for right-handers. And I thought to myself this night, we're going down through Greba. I was just listening for the engine change for Greba Castle and thinking, if I get this wrong, I'm going to kill this kid. And I've known him since he was born. And I made that decision when I got home that night in bed. I made the decision, that's it, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to go out with him because I don't want to hurt him. And I rang another lad, Jason, the local lad, who'd ironically been in an accident on the Monday night with Brian Kelly, so he was stuck without a ride. I said to Jason, do you fancy jumping on with Pete? Because I said, I know you've ridden LCRs before and you quite like them. So Jason jumped at the chance, and then I jumped on with another lad from Liverpool, Dave Hughes, whose passenger had quit on him. And ironically, Jason and Pete got the Best Newcomers Award for the first race. Broke down in the second, and we broke down in both of them, so I didn't get a finish after all that.
So in terms then of you, Ben and Jim, sort of saying to your dad, did you ever sort of have to have a conversation about, this is what we're going to do? Was it just something that was expected?
It was him that dragged me into it. So I also do a lot of amateur dramatics on the island. So when I left school, I was kind of doing a lot of that, and that was taking up most of my time. I went up for the test day that Reece jumped on, and then after that, it was a case of went down for dinner afterwards, and then Dad was like, right, so it's about time that you got your race licence, because Jim needs a passenger, so that was it. It was then a case of, okay, signing up for that. So it wasn't a sit down and have a conversation if we're going to ride together. It was, come on, it's your turn.
Sounds like I've bullied him into it, doesn't it?
No.
It was awful peer pressure.
Tell you what, though, he couldn't tell you off for anything you'd done wrong, could he? Because, I mean, listening to all the rules that might have been bent when...
Yeah, but I can tell them off when I think they've done something wrong on the track.
Jim, we're talking, I mean, we're not that long away now from Southern 100. You're the current Andreas Racing Association sidecar champions as well, so it feels like you've made a massive leap. So not that big a time, really. Tell us how you found the whole process, how preparations are going for the Southern, and how do you prepare for that mentally as well?
Yeah, the rise that we've had in the past year, I'd say, has been pretty big, because we were trundling around at the back at Derby a couple of years ago and just trying to find our feet, and then it was last year it all kind of started to click. We ended up having battles with Dave Quirk until he had his accident at TT. So when then he wasn't there, we then had to find more pace to then catch up with the other guys to start battling with them, which we somehow did. And I think we dropped like 8 seconds in lap time last year around Derby just to try and catch up with people. We got to the point where we were fighting at the front, and just turning up and actually finishing races allowed us to then win the championship, which at the start of the year wasn't in any of our plans. It just kind of happened, which was amazing. And then similar to that, it was going into Southern 100 this year, we were like, we want to try and get to it in the next 2 years, we said, but we had to get our national licence, because unlike in Dad's day where you could just forge your stuff, it's a lot stricter now, and it wasn't just you had to finish races, you have to finish them within a certain amount of time with the race leader. So we had to go across to England a couple of times, and it was going across to the English tracks and riding against loads of other sidecars, because there's no
racing.
Yeah, because there's no Formula Ones over here, and so riding against really fast F2s like Founds and Greg Lambert and stuff like that, riding against these guys, we learned so much. It kind of like heightened our learning curve even more. So we came into this year thinking, right, we've got to get, I think it was 5 signatures.
Yeah.
So we'd earmarked 5 race meetings that we wanted to do, and it was like, right, if we can get it in these 5, that'll be great. But we know that some of them are going to be difficult because of the calibre of people that we'd be coming up against. And we did it in the first 3 events that we went to, and it was like...
We went to the very first one we wanted to go to, we didn't let us in.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give you an entry.
Yeah, we couldn't do that one, but the ones that we actually did get an entry for, because all of the big names didn't turn up, we managed to pick up our pace enough to get up to where we needed to be, and we got all of the signatures that we needed to get our licence to put in for the Southern.
When the boys started out, they're racing at Derby, and they're up against Ryan and Callum, Dave Molyneux and Dan Sale, Harry Payne and people like that. You know, guys that are lapping the TT course at well in excess of 110 mile an hour. And then once you take those 3 that were racing like that year out, and you've got Melly, Quirky and people like that, Jacko, 108 mile an hour lappers at the TT course, and then you had Jim and Ben. So everything that they're trying to do is they're chasing dots in the distance. Once we got rid of the Amar and went to the KTM, it was Dave's idea. He sold us on the idea, and it's been brilliant for us. Turned into a bit of a mare for Dave, but for us, the move to the KTM has been the best thing that we could have done. We haven't got the budget that our rivals have got. So KTM came in at the right price, at the right time. Dave helped us out with so much stuff that he didn't need anymore, because he'd gone to the next size up KTM engine, so he sold us a lot of stuff that he didn't want or couldn't use, is a better way of putting it. And so we've been able to develop the bike up at our speed while they're gaining speed as well. It wasn't until they started to get quicker that we started to find problems. But we've been lucky in the fact that we've got in with a friend of ours, Tim, who's an engineering nerd, and he loves KTM, absolutely loves the KTM, and he's got connections with KTM in Holland. So he's asking the people in Holland, what should we do to do this, what should we do that, and they give him the information, and we raise the money to buy the bits.
You sort of say it like that's easy, but I can imagine, and I don't know what it's been like for you, Ben and Jim, some of the people that I've spoken to throughout this podcast really struggle with the idea of going out to people and asking them to help fund their racing, because they feel that it's something that you're passionate about, but why should other people support you? What's that process been like?
Hard, I would say. It's a very difficult thing to almost sell. Quite a lot of it is almost relying on friends and friends of the family and stuff like that. We're lucky that a lot of like family friends are all from when Dad was racing as well, so they're all also racing mad.
So they get it, don't they? Yeah.
So they get it.
Yeah.
So we've been quite lucky in that sense. I mean, we've got one of our other mechanics, Andy, was actually one of Dad's mechanics. So he mechanicked Dad, and then he's come through, and now he's also helping us with the bike. Chris is another one that's joined us, and it's been invaluable to have these people around who fortunately are also racing mad and love the idea. But I can imagine for other people, when it's you're just starting into it, and maybe it is just you who's kind of got the thing in your head, it would be almost impossible. Because you go to businesses and half the time it's kind of, what can you actually offer them for their sponsorship? And it's quite difficult in that sense.
Unless you're at the front at the TT, most people aren't too interested. We're very lucky in the sponsors that we've got. We've got the old marketing, who have been amazing for us
right from the beginning.
But we got them because I used to work in the Rovers, and Dave, who ran the market, and now Colin, who's in charge, I worked with them while I was there, so that's how we got in with them. Got Forever RR, who run the campsite down at Colby during TT. Obviously, we're from Colby Football Club. I helped set the first campsite up when we did it, so we had it in with them originally. Test and maintenance, Ben works for them, so he kind of like bullied them into it.
Didn't? That was my Christmas bonus, that was.
Gandy and Ryden Electrical Services. Jay Gandy's a massive friend of ours. He plays for the football club, so again, I bullied him into that one. It does take a lot of work. I spent a long time writing letters and emails and stuff to other businesses for them to, most of the time, not even respond. But you've just got to keep working and finding different ways of funding it.
As we speak, we're 2.5 weeks away from the start of the Southern, dare I ask? How is that sort of mentally thinking about everything that needs to be done before that Monday practice starts?
We were testing up at Derby this weekend, and we got off the bike, and it was kind of like a surreal thing of thinking the next time we're on the sidecar, we're going to be riding past our childhood house.
I'm getting all emotional.
Which is a bit of a surreal thought, but it's a lot of excitement. The nerves will kick in. They haven't quite yet, which I'm surprised at, but it's still a lot of excitement. But we still know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Laps around the track, me watching onboards endlessly.
What is the post-race debrief like between you two? Do you have much of that?
Ben usually gives me advice on where to go faster.
Is that well received?
It depends on how he gives it to me.
This is the reason why I shouldn't be a driver as well, because half of it is just like, I reckon we can go like way faster through there. It's like, no, we'd be upside down, Ben.
We had one race at Derby once where Ben came in and he got off the bike and he was like, if you ever swerve down the back straight again, I'm going to punch your lights out. And I was like, you weren't looking. A bike broke down in front of us. I had to get out of the way of him.
I was trying to get myself into position. It was on the warm-up lap. I didn't expect a bike to break down.
They had a period not long after they started where they couldn't stay on the tarmac. They kept grass tracking. This one particular day, they grass tracked off at Derby. They'd cut the grass at Derby, but it hadn't been collected. And as they skidded across the grass, they collected the grass under the bike until there was so much under the bike it lifted the wheels off the floor, so they couldn't go anywhere anymore.
We got beached in a field.
There's got to be a photograph of this.
Oh, we can't find one. I wish there was.
God.
Look, they're stood there watching, and Jim suddenly turned around to Ben and he said, I've worked out why we're getting this wrong here. And I said, why, what do you mean? He said, well, we're trying to take this corner flat in top. He said, even Molly and Ryan are changing down a gear to go around this corner. So maybe that's why we keep going off onto the grass. Light bulb moment.
Dicky, I am intrigued as to how you think it's going to be standing on the sidelines watching your boys go around, because you're heavily involved in the Southern 100 Club, so presumably you'll be
I've
there
got a
as an
committee meeting
official.
tonight.
Yeah.
I'll be in the same place as I was last year. Bricking it. Can't deny it. But I'm in the best place because I've got the headphone. I know where they are. So I'll have more information than Mr. Kinley will, thankfully. It's not going to be easy, but it's their life.
And in terms of advice to them, are you quite quick to give advice? Do they take advice from you?
It depends what the advice is.
Some of it's telling me not to showboat so much.
Yeah, Ben tends to
which
showboat quite a lot.
I do theatre if there's a camera.
I was gonna say,
sometimes I
come
can't
on.
help it.
There's videos of Ben doing the Macarena on the back of the sidecar.
Again, I need to see this.
Yeah.
No,
I've got that
This is
one.
We've got that on the phone, yeah. After they broke down at Cadwell Park and they were being towed back to the pits, Ben's on the back of the bike doing the Macarena.
I even got the dance wrong, it's awful.
Well, he couldn't use the footwork, so, yeah, it depends. I mean, at times with Jim, I did all my football coaching and stuff like that, and there's times when when you've got to be forceful in what you want to say, and there's times when you've got to do it quietly and gently. Like on Sunday, came on off the track, and Tim, the mechanic, looked at me and went, "Are you going to tell him?" And I said, "You're changing down too early for that left-hander." I walked away. And he just turned to Tim and he went, "What do you mean? What does he mean?" I'm turning around. "What's he mean?" And Tim says, "You should take it a bit quicker. You've got proper suspension now. It'll go round." Because we've just put brand new suspension on the bike that we had to fundraise for. So we've got Nitronic front and rear suspension. First time since we've had the bike where the back wheel actually goes up and down like it's supposed to. And the front wheel stays on the road now instead of leaning over when it's cornering. Because one suspension unit was working better than the other, but we just didn't have the money to do it. But there's no way they were going on the road without decent suspension on it. So Jim set up the GoFundMe page to raise the money for it, and we got the money, we got the target.
There's a real sense, I think, that particularly now, and I think the image of sidecar racing has been elevated in recent years. I know it was hugely popular when you were doing it, Dicky, and maybe there was a little bit of a decline, but there's such a passion for watching sidecars out racing, and particularly here on the Isle of Man, we really want to see Manxies do well, and that must be something, I think, that is really heartening from your point of view.
Yeah, because a lot of people over here know that we race. Everyone, when there's sidecar racing on that we're not in, they will always come over and say, "Oh, what did you think of the sidecars?" and blah, blah, blah. And most of the time, the feedback that we get is that there's people that watch the sidecars or are more interested in watching the sidecars go round than they are the solos.
Especially when someone's doing the Macarena on the back.
Oh, exactly, yeah. Me and my fiancée Katie were out watching the TT. We were trying to visit as many different places that we'd not been to this year, and we found a little driveway before Belig Bridge, which we were stood in, and a load of guys on mountain bikes turned up and were stood behind us, and the solo session was on, and then the solos finished, and they were like, "Oh, right, what are we doing now, guys?" And one of them turned around and said, "Oh, it's the sidecars next, so we can just go, we're not too interested in that." And then I kind of turned round, and one of them spotted me turn round, and Katie was like, "Oh, he's gonna say something. He's gonna say something." And I was like, "So why do you not like the sidecars?" And he was like, "Oh, I just find them boring." And I was like, "Well, have you actually watched them?" He goes, "Well, not really, no." And I was like, "Well, I race one." He goes, "You what?" And I was like, "Yeah, I race one. So just have a watch from where we are." And the driveway that we were in was off the road and it goes down. So we were stood basically at road level. So our eye line was at road level. And these crows, fowls, Molly, Birchals came screaming past. And these guys were just stood there like with their jaws on the floor like, "What are these things?" And I was like, "See, I told you should have stayed and watched it." And they were just asking me so many questions while they were going past and stuff like that, and they watched the whole session, and then they were like, "Right, we'll head off now." And I was like, "So there you go, watch the sidecars."
Dare I ask you, Jim and Ben, whether the TT would ever be on the horizon for you?
It would be nice. We do want to do it if we get to that stage. Again, it's a case of being able to afford it, because TT's a step up again in costs and stuff like that. I also do have to convince my fiancée to actually let me do it, which is probably going to be the harder of the two things.
Well, it is tough, isn't it? It is tough, I think, for anybody. Almost easier when you're the person out there doing it, and watching on the sidelines is really hard.
Yeah, Katie has been amazing. I was already racing when I met her, so she knew that I did it when we got together, but I don't think she kind of thought about roads until it became a possibility, because when we first got together we were just bimbling around at the back at Derby, so they're not really doing anything. But as we progressed and got faster and it became a genuine possibility that we could do it, I think that was when she was like, right, okay, I should probably start thinking about him possibly going out onto roads. She's convinced of the Southern 100 for now, so we'll see how this goes and we'll see if she'll let us do the big one.
And Ben, would the TT be in your sights, or would it be something you'd want to do?
Yeah.
I knew I didn't even know to ask that question, actually.
It was kind of actually when we started racing, it was always in my brain at that point, because it was when I start something, I want to go to the highest as I can with it, which for someone that's grown up on the Isle of Man, watching racing, while watching the TT, Southern watching Dad, the highest level is TT. That's the toughest race. That's the end goal, really. And it's a case of doing whatever you can to kind of get there. It's when and how for me.
And Dicky, I'm guessing you knew it was never really going to be any different.
No, I mean, it's like I say, they grew up in the race paddock, but the 4 boys, our eldest Mark, he actually did the TT, he did 4 TTs, and then moved to Switzerland to live, and his real father wouldn't give him time off to continue racing because he was dead against it. When they were kids in the TT paddock, and Mark would go off, and he wasn't helping us with our bike, he would go and help Ian and Debbie Salter with their bike. Jim would go off and help the Irish sidecar team, Reptile Racing, and he'd work in their tent helping them. Ben would go off to Conrad Harrison and help Conrad. So the only one that stayed with us was Tommy, so he'd be with whoever I was riding with at the time. Tommy would be mucking in helping like that, and Mark spent more time going up on stage with the Salters to collect awards than he ever did for himself. But then, to give him credit, I mean, he did get to be British 350 champion 4 years on the trot, so he did all right for himself.
If people want to keep up to date with how you're doing and how the racing is going, where is the best place to find that info?
So we have a Facebook page, Team BSR Sidecar, which is where we put most of our stuff up. We have a Twitter page, which is also Team BSR Sidecar. That gets slightly less attention than the Facebook one does because Twitter's such a hard thing to get any form of traction on. I don't think we have any followers on it, which is hilarious. But we've got a YouTube channel as well, funnily enough, that is also Team BSR Sidecar, which we put onboards and stuff on.
Is that where the Macarena is? We just need to know when we post the link on the podcast
the
page.
Macarena is on TikTok.
Wonderful.
Ben also runs our TikTok account as well, because we've got to be up with the kids.
I didn't even know we had any of this.
Hence the technophobe.
Yes, yeah. Probably wouldn't leave him in charge of your social media.
No.
No, definitely not.
Could be quite funny though.
Watching all the disasters. It'll probably get you more fame by being so rubbish. I'm jealous because in all the years that I did the TT, I never once made it onto the Duke compilation videos. Oh, sorry, me and when I was on with Des Founds, the year that Izzy on the Norton won, and we were on the intro jumping Ballath Bridge. Sorry, taking Ballath Bridge, to use the proper thing. Des never took Ballath Bridge, he leapt it. That's the only time I've ever made it onto the Duke video. Our dog's been on telly more than on ITV4 on the TT thing. Our dog Susie, our spaniel, has been on there more often than that with Jamie Whitten.
We used to play fetch in the paddock, and he would be coming through and he would do the intro, so it would be a case of, oh, he's over there doing the intro, throwing a ball over there, and Susie would run off behind it, run back again, and we'd do that just behind him.
The wife's made it onto the telly. All the boys have made it onto the telly. The dog's made it onto the telly. Me, after 42 years, nada. Nothing.
There's still time. I'm thinking there's got to be some sort of TikTok in here somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Only me watch.
Ben, Dicky, Jim, it's been so lovely talking to you. We'll post the links to your social media pages. Come back once we've done Southern 100 and let's catch up with how you're doing.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Dicky, Jim and Ben Gale. And as I say, the links to their social media will be on the podcast page. Do keep up to date with how they're doing. And honestly, I've seen the video now of the Macarena on the back of the sidecar and it is well worth seeing. Oh, and before I forget, I did say to Jim and Ben that I would include this little bit. So during the recording of the podcast, there was a phone going off and it was Dicky's. Just have a listen to this. I don't know whose phone that is.
Mine.
Sorry. It's all right if you just pop it on sign. That'd be amazing. Sorry, unless it's important.
No, it's never important.
He just doesn't know how to put it on
Too
silent.
many group chats. Is what it is.
Turn off. Come on.
I'm going to keep this.
Turn off. Don't keep this in.
Keep it in.
I'll turn the other one off as well.
How many have you got?
2.
Okay.
Just put it at the end. At least, Greg.
I'm a real technophobe. Not.
No, you are.
You are.
You
You don't know how to put it on
Turn
silent.
off.
You're the definition of a technophobe, Greg.
Needless to say, I'm not allowed to touch the laptop near the bike.
Yeah, can't think why. Journey to a Dream is brought to you by Kawasaki Insurance. You can find out how you can get covered by going to kawasaki-insurance.com. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.